The stagecoach door swung open with a sharp crack, and the woman inside did not move. Dust rolled across the street in thick waves, pushed by a hot Texas wind that never seemed to rest. The town of Red Hollow stood quiet under the late afternoon sun, its wooden buildings faded and tired, as if they had been baked too long in the heat. A few men lingered near the saloon porch. A dog slept beneath a wagon. No one spoke. Everyone was watching the coach. Inside, the Clara Whitmore gripped the seat so tightly her fingers ached. She had been on trains and coaches for nearly 3 weeks, traveling from Boston to the Texas Panhandle. Every mile had carried her farther from everything she knew. Every mile had carried her closer to a man she had never met, her husband, or at least the man who would be her husband. The driver cleared his throat. "Miss, this is Red Hollow." Clara swallowed. Her heart beat so hard she felt it in her ears. She adjusted her bonnet to hide the faint yellow bruise near her temple, the last mark left behind by a night she never wanted to remember again. She picked up her small carpet bag, the only thing she owned now, and forced herself to stand. The moment her boots touched the dirt, the heat struck her like a wall, and so did the silence. He stood near the hitching post, taller than she expected. Broad shoulders, dark hat pulled low, dust-covered boots. A scar ran from his jaw down to his neck, a pale against sun-browned skin. He looked like a man who belonged to storms and bar fights and long, lonely winters. This was not the kind, clean-faced gentleman she had imagined while reading his letters by candlelight. This was danger. He stepped forward slowly, careful, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Miss Whitmore." His voice was deep, rough, but steady. Clara nodded once. "I'm Luke Callahan." Her throat felt dry as the desert around them. And this was the man who had written her careful letters, the man who had described his ranch, his cattle, his simple house by a creek, the man who had promised her respect and partnership. He reached out his hand. She flinched before she could stop herself. The movement was small, but it was enough. Luke froze. For a long second, neither of them breathed. Then his hand lowered slowly, not offended, not angry, just careful. "Darlin, I don't bite," he said quietly, almost gently. "Unless you ask." The corner of his mouth lifted slightly, like he was trying to make light of the moment. Clara did not know if it was meant to be funny. She could not tell if it was a promise or a warning. Behind them, the stagecoach driver unloaded her trunk. It hit the ground with a dull thud that made her jump again. Luke noticed everything. He noticed the way her shoulders stayed tight, the way her eyes kept scanning the street, the way she held her bag like someone might steal it. Oh, and he noticed the bruise. It was fading, but not enough. Something dark passed through his expression before he masked it. "You must be tired," he said. "Ranch is 5 miles out. Got a wagon ready?" She nodded again. Words felt dangerous. He lifted her trunk easily and carried it toward a sturdy buckboard tied near the post. The horse attached to it, a chestnut with calm eyes, flicked its tail lazily. "This here's Jasper," Luke said. "Oh, he's got more sense than most folks in this town." Clara managed the smallest breath of a smile. Luke saw it, and for the first time since the stagecoach arrived, something eased in his chest. He helped her up into the wagon, careful not to touch her more than necessary. When his hand brushed her elbow, she stiffened, but did not pull away. That was something. They rode out of Red Hollow in silence. The town disappeared quickly behind them, replaced by endless stretches of golden grass and wide sky. Clara had never seen land like this before. In Boston, buildings pressed against each other, and streets were always crowded. Here, the world felt too big, too open, too exposed. Luke let the silence sit for a while. He could feel her nerves like heat radiating off her. "You hungry?" he asked eventually. "I'm fine." The words came too quickly. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, there's water behind the seat. Help yourself." She did not move. After another stretch of quiet road, he tried again. "You ever ridden before?" "Yes." "Good. Got a few horses at the ranch. You're welcome to ride any of them." She looked at him then, surprised. "You would allow that?" He glanced around at her. "Allow?" She hesitated. "I mean, most men would not, Darlin," he said softly. "You ain't property. You're here 'cause you chose to be." Her fingers tightened in her lap. Chose. That word felt strange. Back home, choices had been taken from her one by one. Her father's temper, his debts, the arrangement he had made without asking her opinion. Marry a wealthy older man and solve everything. She had refused. The bruise had come the same night. She had answered Luke Callahan's letter 2 days later. The ranch came into view as they crested a low hill. It was smaller than she expected. A simple wooden house, a barn, a corral, smoke rising gently from a chimney, and a creek glinting behind it. Not grand, not impressive, but solid. Luke stopped the wagon in front of the house. "This is it." Clara stepped down slowly, turning in a small circle as she took it all in. No shouting, no servants rushing, no heavy doors slamming. Just wind in the grass and the soft sound of water in the distance. "It's quiet," she said. "Too quiet?" "No." She shook her head. "I think I like it." He carried her trunk inside. The house was simple but clean. A table, 2 chairs, a stove, a small bookshelf, everything in its place. He opened a door on the right. "This would be your room." The bed was neatly made. A small window overlooked the creek. A wash basin sat on a stand, and on the inside of the door was a lock. Clara stared at it. "I put that in last month," Luke said quietly. "Figured you might want it." He held out a small brass key. "You keep it." She took it slowly, like it might disappear. You won't." "No," he said before she finished. "I won't come in unless you invite me." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. No man had ever offered her that kind of space before. "I'll be in the barn," he added. "You rest. Supper in an hour if you're hungry." He left without another word. Clara stood alone in the small bedroom, listening to his boots fade across the porch. She locked the door, not because she feared him, but because she needed to feel the click, needed to know it worked. Outside, Luke leaned against the barn door and let out a slow breath. She was thinner than he expected, quieter, and that bruise. He had seen enough in his life to know what that meant. Whoever hurt her had not done it once. He ran a hand down his face. This was not what he imagined when he sent for a wife. He had imagined awkward conversation, maybe shyness, maybe disappointment. He had not imagined fear. But as he stepped into the barn and began feeding the horses, one thing became clear in his mind. Whoever had put that fear in her eyes would never touch her again. Inside the house, Clara washed her face slowly, staring at her reflection in the small mirror. "You are safe," she told herself, "at least for tonight." When she finally opened the bedroom door, the smell of food drifted through the house. Luke stood at the stove, sleeves rolled, stirring something in a pan. He glanced up when he heard her. "You hungry now?" "Yes," she admitted. He set a plate in front of her and took the seat across the table, not too close. They ate in silence at first. Then he said, "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to." She looked up. "But if there's something chasing you," he continued, "I'd rather face it standing next to you than have it sneak up on us." Her heart stuttered. You would stand next to me?" she asked. "Yeah. Even if it brings trouble?" He met her eyes fully for the first time, especially then. Outside, the sun sank lower, painting the prairie gold. And somewhere far behind them, in a city crowded with shadows and men who did not take no for an answer, someone had just realized Clara Whitmore was gone. And he was not the kind of man who let things go easily. The knock came 3 days later. It was not loud, but it was sharp enough to make Clara's heart slam against her ribs. She had just finished hanging laundry behind the house. The wind carried the smell of clean cotton and creek water. For a moment, life had almost felt normal. Luke was in the barn. The knock came again. 3 steady raps against the front door. Clara froze. Her hands went cold. Her breath turned shallow. That old, sick feeling crept back into her stomach. She knew that knock. Not the sound, but the feeling behind it. As someone who believed they owned you never knocked gently. She turned slowly toward the house. Luke stepped out of the barn at the same moment, wiping his hands on a rag. He had heard it too. Their eyes met across the yard. He saw the fear instantly. He crossed the space between them in long strides. "Inside," he said quietly. "No." Her voice surprised even her. "I won't hide." His jaw tightened, but he nodded once. "Stay behind me." He opened the door. A man stood on the porch wearing a dark traveling coat that did not belong in Red Hollow. His boots were polished, his hair neatly parted, his face smooth and pale, untouched by sun or hard labor. Clara's vision narrowed. Edward Whitmore, her father. For a moment, the world went silent. "Clara." His voice was calm, controlled, the same tone he used before anger. "You look thin." Luke stepped slightly to the side, blocking half the doorway. "Can I help you?" he asked evenly. Edward's eyes slid over him with open disdain. "I am here for my daughter." Clara felt something twist inside her. "I am not your daughter anymore," she said. Edward's jaw flexed. "You will not embarrass this family further. You will pack your things and return home. Immediately." Luke's shoulders squared. "She's not going anywhere." Edward's gaze snapped to him. "And you are?" "Her husband." The word hung in the air. Edward laughed once, short and sharp. "You expect me to believe that?" Luke did not flinch. "We were married in Red Hollow. Judge Harper performed the ceremony." Edward's eyes flicked to Clara's hand. The simple band of silver Luke had bought in town caught the sunlight. Her father's face hardened. "You think a rushed frontier wedding can erase a legal arrangement?" Clara's stomach dropped. Luke's voice stayed steady. "What arrangement?" Edward looked at Clara like she had betrayed him. You did not tell him." "Tell me what?" Luke asked. Clara swallowed. There was no hiding now. "My father promised me to a man named Charles Beaumont, a business associate, to settle debts." Luke went still. Edward continued. "Mr. Beaumont paid handsomely for the agreement. You belong to him." "I belong to no one," Clara said, her voice shaking but loud. Edward ignored her. "You have no understanding of how the world works. Women do not run off to marry ranch hands because they feel frightened." Luke stepped fully onto the porch now, forcing Edward back a half step. "She's not frightened here." Edward's gaze sharpened. "You think you can protect her from the consequences of what she's done?" "I know I can try." The air between them turned tight. Clara could feel it building. That familiar shift in her father's posture. The way his hand twitched at his side. Luke saw it too. Edward took a step forward. "Clara," he said quietly, dangerously. "Come inside. We will discuss this like civilized people." Luke moved at the same time. His hand caught Edward's wrist before it could reach her. The grip was firm, unyielding. "Don't," Luke said softly. Edward looked down at the hand holding him, stunned. "You dare touch me?" Luke's voice dropped lower. "You don't get to touch her." Clara had never seen anyone stop her father before. Never seen anyone look him in the eye without fear. Edward pulled his arm free, straightening his coat. "This is not over," he said coldly. "Mr. Beaumont does not forgive insult. He will come himself if necessary." Clara's blood ran cold. Edward stepped off the porch. "You will regret this foolishness," he said. "Both of you." He mounted his horse and rode away without another word. The dust settled slowly behind him. Clara did not realize she was shaking until Luke turned toward her. "Oh, he won't stop," she whispered. Luke stepped closer, but did not touch her. "Then neither will I." Her throat tightened. "You don't understand who Charles Beaumont is," she said. "He is wealthy, connected. He does not like to lose." Luke's eyes darkened. "I don't care how rich he is." "You should." "I don't." She looked at him then, really looked at him. "You would fight for me?" He let out a slow breath. "Clara, I don't know everything about your past, but I know what I see. I see a woman who was scared when she stepped off that stage. I see bruises that didn't come from falling downstairs. I see someone who thought she had no choice." His voice softened. "You've got one now." Her chest felt tight. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you risk this?" He held her gaze steadily. "Because I meant what I said. I don't bite, unless you ask." She let out a shaky breath that almost turned into a laugh. The tension cracked just slightly, but fear still lingered. What that night, Clara could not sleep. Every sound outside the window made her flinch. Every shift of wind sounded like hoofbeats. Luke lay awake in his own room, staring at the ceiling. He had known there might be complications. He had not expected men with money and pride to follow her across states. Near midnight, he rose quietly and stepped onto the porch. The prairie stretched silent under the moonlight. He stayed there until dawn. 3 days passed, then 5. Clara began to hope that perhaps Edward had simply been angry and would not return. Then the rider came. This one was not her father. This one was worse. The horse was large and expensive, the saddle polished. The man riding it wore a tailored black coat and gloves despite the heat. Charles Beaumont. Clara knew him instantly. He stopped in front of the house, removed his gloves slowly, and looked up at the porch where she and Luke stood. "Clara," he called, his voice smooth and almost pleasant. "You look well." Her stomach churned. "You should not have come," she said. "I paid for you." Luke stepped forward. "You need to turn around." Beaumont's eyes slid to him. "And you are?" "Her husband." Beaumont smiled faintly. "I find that difficult to accept. It doesn't matter what you accept." Beaumont dismounted calmly. "I am not here for a fight," he said. "I am here to correct a mistake." He looked at Clara. "You panicked. Your father mishandled the situation. But I am a reasonable man." Luke's hand rested near his belt now. Clara felt her pulse racing. "I am not a mistake," she said quietly. Beaumont's gaze sharpened. "You are naive." "No," she said. "I was trapped." Silence fell. Beaumont studied her face. "Can you believe this rancher can give you more than I can?" Clara felt something shift inside her. For years, she had been told what she was worth, measured in contracts and debt. But here, in this small house by a creek, she had been given a key to her own door. You cannot give me freedom, she said. Beaumont's expression changed. It lost its politeness. If you do not come willingly, he said softly, I will make this very unpleasant. Luke moved without hesitation, and he stepped directly between them. You threaten her again, Luke said quietly, and you won't leave this ranch standing upright. Beaumont's eyes flicked down to Luke's hands, calloused, steady, not shaking. You think violence will solve this? Luke's voice stayed calm. I think you're not used to hearing no. The wind picked up, carrying dust across the yard. For a long moment, no one moved. Clara felt the old fear rising again. But beneath it, something new began to grow. Anger. She stepped forward. Mr. Beaumont, she said clearly, I will not go with you. I never agreed to marry you. I was never yours. His jaw clenched. You forget your place. My place is here. Beaumont looked at Luke one last time. You have no idea what kind of enemy you're making. Luke did not look away. Then don't make me one. Beaumont mounted his horse in one smooth motion. This is not finished, he said. Then he rode away. The dust swallowed him slowly. Clara stood frozen, while Luke turned toward her carefully. He'll be back, she whispered. Maybe, Luke said. And if he is? He stepped closer. Then we'll be ready. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. I didn't want this for you, she said. I didn't want to bring danger to your door. He shook his head. You didn't bring it. You had a quiet life before me. He looked out across the land. Quiet isn't the same as alive. She stared at him. You don't regret marrying me? He met her eyes. Not once. The wind eased. The creek kept running behind the house. But far down the road, beyond the hills and dust, Charles Beaumont was not the kind of man who accepted humiliation. And this time, he would not come alone. The first shot came at dawn. It shattered the quiet like breaking glass. Clara jerked upright in bed, her heart racing before her mind caught up. The sound echoed across the prairie, followed by the frantic whinny of horses. Luke was already moving. Yet he grabbed his boots, pulled on his shirt, and reached for the rifle mounted beside the door. Stay inside, he said. She was already on her feet. No! Another gunshot cracked through the air, this one closer. Luke's jaw tightened. Clara! I won't hide, she said again, her voice shaking but firm. Not anymore. For half a second he hesitated. Then he nodded once. Stay behind me. They stepped onto the porch together. Smoke drifted from the direction of the barn. Bell and 3 riders stood near the corral fence. Charles Beaumont sat tall in his saddle, his dark coat a sharp line against the pale morning sky. 2 men flanked him, both armed. One of them fired another shot into the air. Come out, Callahan, the man shouted. This ain't your fight. Luke stepped forward, rifle steady in his hands. It is now. Clara felt the old fear claw at her chest, but she did not step back. Beaumont's eyes found her instantly. You are forcing my hand, Clara, he called out calmly. I offered you dignity. You offered me ownership, she shouted back. One of the hired men laughed harshly. Luke did not lower his rifle. You've made your point, Luke said. Now leave. Beaumont dismounted slowly, boots landing in the dirt. I cannot leave without what is mine. You keep saying that word, Luke replied. She's not yours. Beaumont's composure cracked slightly. I paid $50,000. Clara's breath caught. She had never known the exact amount. Luke's grip tightened on the rifle. You paid her father, Clara said loudly. Not me. Beaumont looked at her with something close to irritation. You think this is about affection? Yes, she said. The word stunned even her. "Yes," she repeated. "It is." The wind shifted, carrying the smell of smoke from the barn roof, where a small flame had started near a haystack. One of Beaumont's men had tossed a lit torch. Luke saw it immediately. "Clara, inside," he said sharply. But she did not move. Instead, she stepped off the porch. The dirt felt hot beneath her bare feet. "I am not a debt," she said, her voice rising. "I am not a contract. I am not something to be purchased and dragged back because it is convenient." Beaumont's face darkened. "You embarrass yourself." "No," she said, louder now. "You embarrass yourself, riding across states to collect a woman who does not want you." The two hired men shifted uncomfortably. Luke moved closer to her side. The fire near the barn began to spread along the dry wood. "Last warning," Luke said quietly. Beaumont looked between them. And then something changed in his expression. Not anger. Calculation. He turned slightly and nodded once to his men. One of them raised his rifle. Luke fired first. The shot rang through the morning air, striking the rifle clean out of the man's hands. The second hired man panicked and fired wildly, the bullet hitting the barn wall. Clara screamed as sparks flew. Luke grabbed her and pulled her toward the water trough near the house. "Stay low!" Beaumont reached for his own pistol, but before he could raise it, another shot cracked from the far hill. A rider appeared over the ridge, then two more. Red Hollow's sheriff and 3 ranchers. Luke's closest neighbor had heard the first shots and ridden hard for help. The sheriff fired into the air. "That's enough!" The sudden shift startled Beaumont's men. One of them backed toward his horse. The other froze. The sheriff rode closer. "What's going on here?" Luke kept his rifle trained. "Well, they tried to burn my barn." The smoke made the truth obvious. The sheriff's gaze moved to Beaumont. "You aiming to start a war out here?" Beaumont straightened his coat, as if this were a social visit gone wrong. "This is a private matter. Not when you're firing guns and torching property." The sheriff's voice hardened. "You and your boys can drop the weapons, or I'll drop you." Beaumont looked at Clara one last time. There was no warmth left in his eyes now, only cold defeat. "You will regret this life," he said. Clara's voice did not tremble. "I already chose it." The hired men dropped their rifles. The sheriff's deputies disarmed them quickly. Beaumont did not resist, but his pride had been wounded in a way that money could not mend. As they were led away, the small fire on the barn wall was beaten down with buckets of water. Luke turned to Clara slowly. "You all right?" Her knees felt weak, but she was standing. "Yes." He stepped closer. His hand hovered for a moment before gently touching her shoulder. She did not flinch. Not this time. The sheriff rode up again. "You want to press charges?" Luke glanced at Clara. She nodded. "Yes," she said clearly. "I do." Beaumont paused mid-step. "You think prison frightens me?" "No," she said, "but losing does." The sheriff smirked faintly. "I will see what the judge says about attempted arson and armed intimidation." The riders led Beaumont and his men away in a cloud of dust. Silence settled slowly over the ranch. The barn wall was scorched but standing. The house untouched. The creek still running. Luke let out a long breath. Clara looked at her hands. They were shaking, but not from fear, from release. "It's over," she whispered. He stepped closer. This time it is." Her eyes filled with tears she had held back for years. "You didn't have to fight for me." "Yes, I did." "No," she said, looking up at him. "You chose to." He held her gaze. Same difference. She laughed softly through her tears. He reached for her. Slow, careful, giving her space to step back if she needed. She didn't. She stepped forward instead. Her hands rested against his chest. "I'm not scared anymore," she said quietly. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her steady. "You don't ever have to be." She leaned into him. For the first time since stepping off that stagecoach, the fear that had lived in her bones began to loosen. The barn could be repaired. The fence could be rebuilt. But something else had been restored that morning. Her voice, her choice, her freedom. Luke pulled back slightly. "You still sure you want this quiet ranch life?" he asked softly. She smiled. "It stopped being quiet the day I arrived." He huffed a small laugh. "That's true." She looked out across the prairie. The sun was rising higher now, washing everything in gold. "I chose this life," she said again. "And I choose you." He swallowed once. "Darlin," he murmured, brushing his thumb along her cheek. "I don't bite." She tilted her head slightly. "I know." A faint smile curved his lips. "Unless you ask." For the first time, she laughed freely. "Oh, then maybe," she said softly. "I will." The wind moved gently through the tall grass. The smoke faded. The danger passed. And under the wide Texas sky, Clara Whitmore stood not as someone's daughter, not as someone's debt, not as something to be claimed, but as Clara Callahan. By choice, by love, and by her own brave decision to step off a stagecoach and never look back.